Welcome to the Sheepdog Project, everybody. Doc flying solo today. Tim out saving the world. He'll be back soon. Hope everybody's doing well. What we're going to talk about today, totally different subject. I want to talk about mental health. I get a lot of questions about this. I get a lot of questions in my practice. I get a lot of email questions, and it is something that I've got a lot of exposure to. Again, I'm an emergency medicine physician. I'm not a psychiatrist. However, I do tend to see a lot of mental health issues in my practice, especially in my military practice. It's a common thing. So I get a lot of questions about this. A lot of you have emailed me, hit me up through Sheepdog, and hit me up through my social media pages, asking me some pretty specific mental health questions. And I want to address that. This isn't going to be a catch-all. You're not going to walk away from this with the 100% answer and just able to go through life with all of your problems solved. That's not what's going to happen today. I'm going to give you a framework. I'm going to give you a little bit of information about why things are processed the way that they are, and I'm going to give you some guidelines that I have used throughout my career, throughout multiple deployments, and what I've seen other guys like Tim use. And Tim has addressed mental health, especially in the veteran population. He's taken a little bit of heat for it because, Tim likes to be candid, and he didn't say anything that was wrong, and some people took offense to kind of the way he worded it. But if you know Tim, he's blunt, and let me tell you, people, he's more blunt with his friends and associates than he is with the general public. So if you think Tim's blunt on social media and in interviews, you don't know the half of it. And we've gotten questions that stemmed from that. There was a Facebook post he put up, I think it was about a year ago, that generated a lot of questions, and we've gotten some info, or should I say, we've gotten some questions on that. So let's talk about it. So right now in the United States, 1 in 6 Americans are on some type of psychiatric med. This has doubled since 2011. This has doubled. What's happened since 2011 that's made it double? Well, a couple of different things, and we're going to talk about that. Right now, we lead the world in anxiety and depression. You go to a country, believe it or not, you go to a country in sub-Saharan Africa, there is less anxiety and depression. People who don't know where their next meal is coming from, people uprooted by warfare, people still dealing with diseases that were completely stomped out in the United States generations ago, they have less anxiety and depression than we do. Why is that? What's going on here? Well, a lot of things are going on here. First of all, Americans, I love this country. I would do anything for this country, and I have done a lot for this country. Not that I'm trying to get credit for that, but I've made my life trying to do what's right for this country. But I got to say. This is something that I wouldn't let somebody from outside the U.S. say, but we've got pretty unrealistic expectations in America. We really do. We have unrealistic expectations on what a happy life should be. Somebody in that sub-Saharan African country, and Nigeria is the one that I recently saw in doing a little bit of research for this, that has very few mental health problems. Their priorities are, where's my next meal coming from? Is my roof leaking? Is my family provided for? Do I have the basic necessities of life? We've kind of got that taken care of in the United States. Even at the bottom rung of society, at the bottom rung of the socioeconomic ladder, everybody has their basic necessities pretty well addressed. Let's be real. So where do we get these unrealistic expectations about what happiness should be? We get them from television. We get them from movies. You go and watch a movie, you watch a TV show, everybody just seems really happy. It gives you, in my opinion, an unrealistic expectation of how much kind of day-to-day interpersonal friction you should be getting from people. And I think that frames things in such a way that our expectations are, I'm supposed to feel great every day, physically and mentally. I'm not supposed to have any of this strife. So if I am having these issues, well, something's wrong with me. So what I'm saying here is our threshold to say we have a problem, I think, is set a little bit higher. So when you figure 100%, living your life at 100% is as good as you can expect, right? Americans, if we're only getting, say, 80% satisfaction out of life, then we start to raise red flags that something's really wrong. You go to other parts of the world, they don't even dream of seeing 100%. If they're living at 80%, they're living as well or better than most of the people they've ever interacted with. They got to get down below 50% before they start to raise red flags like, I'm really having problems coping with this. And that's what I mean when I say that threshold in Americans is set a little bit higher. And this also comes from advertising. So what are all these commercials that you see on TV, right? Everybody's happy, drinking soft drinks, drinking a beer, whatever it might be, driving a particular automobile. They're all very happy. They're getting the most out of life. And you look at that and you're like, why isn't my life exactly like that? Because that's not realistic. That's an advertisement. That's meant to draw you in. That's meant to sell a product. And that's why. But we are inundated by this day in and day out, in billboards and radio and podcasting and television and everything else. And it sets us up for failure. It really does. It gives us an unrealistic expectation of how much we're going to spend on the joy side of life and how much we're going to spend on the, hey, things are getting a little bit difficult side of life. Now, let me back up from that a second. I said that maybe our expectations are unrealistic. And they are. But you know what? Life should be joyful. You should get a lot of joy out of life. Maybe if you're not getting a lot of joy out of life, maybe it has a little bit more to do with what your priorities in life are. So I am constantly reminding myself, I didn't have a lot growing up. We weren't destitute by any means. My parents did very well to provide for us. But I frame everything now in, is there a roof over my head? Is there food in my refrigerator? Do I know that my bills are going to be paid at the end of the month? Everything on top of that I see is gravy. I don't think having the most trendy shoes or the most trendy jeans or the most trendy vehicle or any of this other stuff, those are all nice trappings, but I don't put a lot of stock in that. And that's done a lot for me mental health wise, is the priorities. There's something out there called the hierarchy of needs, and a lot of you are nodding your head because you know exactly what I'm talking about. If you go out and look up the hierarchy of needs, this little pyramid, and it basically tells you what you need kind of in the order that you need it. And the more you get into the stuff that you don't necessarily need, the farther you get away from the base of that pyramid, you're talking about stuff that's nice to have. These are like leather bucket seats. But in America, we tend to put too much emphasis on the leather bucket seats. Well, I got to have the leather bucket seats because the people that I see in television have the leather bucket seats, and my next door neighbor has the leather bucket seats. If I don't have the leather bucket seats, then I got a problem. There's a lot of other stuff that goes into it, a lot of our interpersonal stuff, and I'm going to talk about that a little bit more as we go. I want to jump back for a second and talk about that doubling that I said has occurred since 2011. A lot of things happened in that time. So did life get worse in America from 2011 to 2016, 2017? I think in some ways, yes, it did. I think it was magnified by what we saw in the media, what we saw reported on television, and I think that kind of amplified it a little bit. I'm not saying that the facts weren't there to back it up, that we weren't having a lot more strife going on. We had some socioeconomic difficulties as a nation. We were very much struggling in a lot of ways. You saw a great increase in violence against police, in violence, rioting, looting through a lot of different instances throughout the United States. So that was going on in that time frame. Something else happened in that time frame, though, that I think played into it as well, that points directly at the increase in Americans taking psych meds. So 2011, I was in residency as an emergency medicine physician from 2006 to 2009. During that time, representatives from drug companies would come, and also when I was in medical school before that, representatives from drug companies would come to physicians, come to medical students as well, and residents, and they would give these spiels about what these medications were that they were marketing, and this is what we have, and this is how it works. These are the tests that we've done. This is why we feel it's a great product, and this is what it'll cost your customers, and this is why we think you should give it. The medical community took a lot of heat back in those days because basically a lot of physicians were accused of getting a lot of free stuff from all these drug reps, all these drug companies, and then peddling these drugs to their patients, and some would call them customers. I don't, because they're patients, and getting them on these medications because, well, I got X number of free steak dinners, and maybe they flew me down to the Bahamas for a conference that was sponsored by this drug company or whatever it might be. Well, there was a lot of scrutiny on the medical community because something terrible was going on. So that really shut down about the time period that I was in residency, especially around 2009, 2010 timeframe. They really started to shut down these drug reps having access to physicians, coming to what we call grand rounds lectures and talking about their medications, all this stuff. Well, the drug companies still had the same goal, which was to sell their product that they manufacture. And they still had the same budget to do that. So they're not just going to stop doing that. So what do? They started advertising on television. So the 2011 and on time frame is the same time frame that we're talking about. You started seeing all these television commercials for antidepressants, for anti-anxiety medicines, for all these. Ask your doctor if it might be right for you. And a lot of these television commercials, again, painted that very unrealistic expectation. Like, you're depressed, shows it depicts someone who is depressed, going through life depressed, and then it shows where they get linked up with whatever the name of this pharmaceutical is, and all of a sudden their life is happy. Now the sun is out and birds are flying and a weight has been lifted off their shoulders and they're smiling. Well, number one, it's painting a very unrealistic expectation of what it's like when you get on these medications, because it's not like flipping a light switch. I'll tell you that right now. And number two, a little bit more goes into it than that. We shouldn't just be throwing medications at things. Somebody shouldn't be going right into their physician's office and saying, "Hey, I saw an advertisement for X, and I want to be on it because my life really sucks." Well, maybe we need to talk about why you think your life really sucks, and does it really suck? Maybe there's some other things that you can do completely aside from medication that might help you with that. We're going to talk more about that at the end, about some basic things that you can do lifestyle-wise that have nothing to do with medication that I'm 100% sure can improve your quality of life and improve your psychological outlook on life. But that stopped happening because people were going into their doctor's office and they're saying, and literally demanding these medications. I saw a commercial, this can fix me, this is what I want. This was also the same time frame that what we call Press-Ganey scores became really important. That doctors became very fixated on what their rating was by their patients. And we started to see Yelp ratings and things like that online referencing physicians. And a lot of physicians, especially physicians in private practice, especially primary care physicians, this is a livelihood for them. I mean, in some, they took an oath, but this is also a business. This is their livelihood. And if they have a gazillion Yelp reviews with 1 star saying this doctor never gives me what I need, even though it's not necessarily what you need, it might be what you want, well, they're going to get less business and they could go out of business. And that became a concern for a lot of them. I'm going to be honest with you, that's never been a concern of mine. And I've had some terrible patient complaints written against me that had nothing to do with patient outcomes, had nothing to do with me harming a patient or anything like that. Basically, it had to do with, and you guys know, especially if you follow me on social media, I can be a bit of an ass, and I can be pretty blunt with people. But I never do so in a way, especially with patients, that I'm trying to be objectionable just for the sake of being objectionable. I do so with the intention of being a good physician and giving that person what they need to be a good and healthy patient. And I got complaints about it. And I'm the type of person that I just let that roll off my back. I don't care. Not all physicians are that way. So the combination of all these things, the advertising, the patient satisfaction scores, and some legitimate turmoil in our society have all kind of coupled together to cause the number of Americans on antidepressant medications to double in about a 5-year period, which is pretty serious. And we lead the world in that. So, and of all the things you want to lead the world in, that's not the thing you want to lead the world. Let's be honest. That's not the thing you want to be way up there on. Social media plays into a lot of this, and multiple studies have been done that shows that most people are getting negative effects from social media. I'm not discouraging you from doing it. Use it as a positive outlet. And I've talked about in this program about back when it was under my old podcast, about using social media in a more positive fashion. And let's be honest, I'm not a champion of that. I use it as a form of entertainment. I don't get wrapped up on it. I don't lose sleep over anything that happens on social media, and you shouldn't either. And again, I talked about the turmoil in our society and the news media, and hey, there's a saying in news: if it bleeds, it leads, right? If it's sensationalistic, if it's going to grab people, if it's footage of people in masks throwing garbage cans through Starbucks windows and setting them on fire, people are going to watch that, and that's what they're going to report. So, a puppy getting saved out of a tree, or I don't know what a puppy would be doing in a tree, a kitten getting saved out of a tree, stuff like that, that's not going to be the lead news story, and it's just not. So a lot of the news media has really fed the flames of this, especially during the election cycle. And there was a huge spike in people getting psychiatric visits and getting on psychiatric medications, right, especially during November, during the election cycle. So how do we keep ourselves mentally fit on a daily basis, and how do we maintain that mental fitness, especially as it applies to a sheepdog lifestyle? So let's bring that around. Let's bring that around to specifically what this podcast talks about, the sheepdog lifestyle. So somebody who's willing to put it on the line, somebody who lives as a sheepdog, not a sheep, who is willing to protect others, who's willing to take out the wolves. How do you do that? How do you keep that balance and be a sheepdog, but keep your faculties about you? And and it's always been said, especially among special operators, that hey, these guys got a little bit of a screw loose. And you do see, you've heard it with Tim, I'm sure you've heard it with me too. We have a little bit of a dark sense of humor. We look at things a little bit differently. It comes with the territory, and I'm not saying you have to warp yourself or be a warped individual. And I don't think any of us, although we joke around about it, really think of ourselves in that way to begin with. But there are some basic things that you need to do. So let's start with the most basic thing. The most basic thing is physical fitness equals mental fitness. We know that. People who are physically fit, and I don't mean necessarily a professional athlete or a professional bodybuilder, because professional bodybuilders actually do have a lot of mental issues, and that's been studied and there have been papers written on it. People that are in their ideal zone of fitness, okay, they have good mental fitness as well, good mental and emotional fitness. So if you're doing everything right for physical fitness, you've already done something that is huge. You've taken a big step towards your mental fitness just by doing that. Just by putting in the work to be physically fit, you're causing what we call homeostasis. You are causing the correct balance of electrolytes, of neurotransmitters, of everything in your body working together that helps you have mental fitness. Because remember, these feelings of anxiety, these feelings of depression, oftentimes this is a mental or psychological warning to you that you are doing something wrong lifestyle-wise. So if you're doing everything right lifestyle-wise, if you're eating right, if you're having a balanced diet, getting less refined foods, plenty of water, things that we were designed to eat, and you're exercising, then you're keeping yourself in that homeostasis, in that alignment, and you're not going to push yourself to the point that you start to get those mental and psychological red flags that say you're doing something wrong, you're just living wrong, you're living wrong, you need to push back the other way. And so that's a really important key. I mean, just start with your diet. What are you eating? If I ate McDonald's every day, I would probably be depressed. If I ate a lot of refined foods, I would probably be anxious all the time, because you're not going to get the building blocks that you need for neurotransmitters, for hormones, for all of these precursors in your body, for your body to do everything that it needs to do, and you're going to feel lousy. Sometimes it's hard to tell, do I physically feel lousy or do I mentally feel lousy? We have what we call somatization disorder, where people physically feel ill and it's because of psychological reasons. Well, the opposite is also true. You can be physically a wreck and it just causes you psychologically to also be a wreck. So eat right. Stay away from those refined foods. Stay away from those processed foods. Eat healthy. Okay, I'm not saying you go out there and do some crazy diet or cleanse or anything like that. I'm saying just basic stuff. You should be coming into the supermarket, taking that hard right, going over there to the produce section and getting the good fresh green leafy vegetables, getting those lean meats, avoiding the stuff that comes in a can or that comes frozen that you pop in the microwave, because those are not giving you what you need, and you can counter those with supplements and vitamins and everything else. But the fact of the matter is, if you just eat right, you're going to feel a lot more healthy. Because a lot of these things that they come out with, you hear about these studies where they find out whatever it is, ginkgo or turmeric or whatever it is, that the benefit, fish oil. You can get all that stuff in food. You can get all that stuff in food. You can get all that stuff at the most basic level in food, and you'll feel better for it, just all around. It's going to be a little bit more work, and Tim and I talked about that a lot on previous shows, but you're going to feel better psychologically. Exercise. How does that help you? Well, first of all, it helps maintain metabolism and circulation. It stimulates the production of all those beneficial neurotransmitters. And specifically what I'm talking about are serotonin and dopamine. And if you look at psychiatric meds, there's a family of them out there called selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, that what they're doing is they're helping you maintain that proper balance of serotonin. Well, you can do that if you're eating right and you're exercising, as I said. You're going to be making all of these neurotransmitters in the proper amounts to keep you stimulated, to keep you feeling good. You really are. Exercise also helps you clear all these toxins away. People are very caught up on all these cleanses and all, steam and, these baths and cupping. I got to do all this stuff to get the toxins out. Hey, you know what the best way to get toxins out is? Exercise. Just sweat them out, okay? Metabolize those toxins. Just literally, you're going to burn them away, okay? Guess where a lot of these toxins are stored? A lot of things that are bad for you. Guess where they're stored? They're stored in fat cells. I'll give you a great example of that. And I'm not saying this as a condemnation of cannabis. That's a whole nother, the benefits of cannabis and the detractors of cannabis are a whole nother podcast. Just recently, Kelvin Gastelum, we all know, and of course Tim has fought him, got busted for THC on a urinalysis. And one of the things that got brought up is the fact that Kelvin had a little bit of extra fat on his body, so it stayed in his body longer. So these are metabolites, again, whether you believe in the medicinal purposes of cannabis or not, these byproduct metabolites are not beneficial. Okay, and these are the types of things that are stored in your fat. Things that are byproducts of other things that might be inert or might be harmful, but usually are not beneficial, and they're stored in fat. So if you're exercising, you're burning fat, you're also metabolizing all of these toxins that are stored in your fat cells. You're just basically burning stuff up. I remember in high school being told by my football coach that, hey, oh, you got a cold? You need to run some laps. You got to get out there and sweat it out. Sweat it out of your system. Which, okay, there's not any good science that you can sweat a virus away, but I can tell you that I usually felt a lot better after running those laps. So getting your metabolism up and burning this stuff off, and also as another benefit of that, making more of these neurotransmitters that you need is what's going to help you, and it's going to help you feel better all across the spectrum. Also, as we know, when you're doing really rigorous exercise, you're pushing yourself, really pushing the envelope. You get what's called an endorphin release. So these are like natural. They're like natural opiates without all the bad stuff involved. So you get almost a euphoric feeling, and we call it runner's high, just from doing this rigorous exercise. And you're doing that naturally. You're not doing that with something you injected in your veins, you bought on a street corner or bought down at the CVS. You're doing this naturally with stuff your own body is producing, okay? You can't get any better. We talk about how pharmaceutical grade is so good, okay? Human body grade is the best thing that you can get for all this stuff. Your own endorphins, your own neurotransmitters, your own hormones, testosterone, estrogen, luteinizing hormone, all this stuff. Getting it right there from the source. You're not getting it processed. You're not getting it packaged. You're producing it yourself. We talk about locally sourced vegetables. You go to restaurants where they harp on the locally sourced vegetables. Hey, how about some locally sourced neurotransmitters and hormones that you're making right there in your own endocrine system? How about that? That's going to make you really feel good. So do it. Exercise. That's really important. With the diet and exercise comes proper rest. You have to get proper rest, and I can't emphasize this enough. Sleep disturbance in the U.S. is huge. I have battled sleep disturbances my whole life. It's something that's really difficult. We're going to talk about specifically about sleep on an upcoming episode where I'm literally going to talk about nothing but. I'm going to talk about sleep hygiene. I'm going to talk about some natural supplements that you can do, and some natural things that you can do to help yourself sleep. But I can't emphasize this enough. You need to be blocking yourself out 9 hours. Not blocking out 8, because if you block out 8, you're going to get 6 or 7. You need to block out 9 and get that solid 8. Or you might be a person who needs more. But I recommend at least blocking out 9, getting 8 hours of good sleep, and then getting up in the morning being ready to meet the day. Because if you're not getting the sleep, then you're not getting the proper rest period. You can do the best workout program in the world, have the best diet in the world. But if you're not getting enough sleep, you're not rebuilding. Because that is the point that all of your anabolic stuff occurs. All of the building, all of the muscle building, all of the formation of all these building blocks and hormones and neurotransmitters, they're all happening when you're asleep. Really, really, really important. There was an experiment that was done years ago that they used to always talk about, where they would take one dog and they would keep it up for days, and they would have another dog and they would let the dog sleep. And then they would draw cerebrospinal fluid off of the dog they had kept awake, and they would inject it into the other dog, and then that dog would get sleeping. So you're building up all these waste products that are telling your body that you need rest, that you need to sleep. So you need to listen to your body, because the only way you're going to metabolize those and make them go away and reset yourself is by getting that proper rest. Very important. Another thing that's important is that you avoid what I call self-medication. Self-medication can occur with alcohol. It can occur with drugs. It can occur with bad behavior. But you need to not self-medicate. If you find yourself, I had a really hard day, I'm going to pick up an entire 6-pack of beer and go home and drink it. That's not the answer. Or I had a real hard day, I'm going to pick up an entire cheesecake on the way home and I'm going to eat it when I get home. That's not the answer, okay? Any type of toxic substance or any type of bad behavior is not appropriate self-medication, okay? Self-adjustment is one thing. So saying, hey, I had a really hard day, so I'm going to put my running shoes on and I'm going to go for a run, and I'm going to get out there and sweat it out and clear my head, something like that. Or I had a really hard day, so I'm going to go home and I'm going to make myself a really healthy dinner, and I'm going to get to bed a little bit early and get a good night's sleep. Those are the proper ways to approach it. You start self-medicating, especially with alcohol, especially with drugs, prescription or otherwise, and you've got a problem, and that's not the way out. That's just going to make it worse. Because what are you doing? Number one, you're just basically masking something up front. I can drink myself into oblivion and not think about my problems. Did my problems go away? No. Now I woke up in the morning, all that stuff is still there, because really all you're doing is time traveling. You're not gonna wake up from that and you're not thinking about whatever it is that's bothering you anymore. You just locked it out for a time period. And in fact, you've prolonged the problem, because instead of mentally dealing with it up front, you've just switched it off. You've switched to another channel in your internal TV. You're watching that for a while. But when you switch back over, that program that was giving you grief is still at the exact same point in the show that it was at when you left it. The only difference is now you have all of the damage that was done to you by the self-medicating. If it was alcohol, you've got a hangover. If it was a cheesecake, now your cholesterol has gone through the roof, and now you've blown your cheat day, and you've got to work through all these extra calories that you took on. So that's not helping. So don't self-medicate, man. I can't emphasize that enough. Be positive. Be positive in your day-to-day life. Don't be the glass half empty person all the time. Be the glass half full person. Be the person who speaks up and says, well, hey, we got our health, or we got a roof over our head, or the car's paid for, or at least nobody died. Whatever it is, be the voice of positivity. That's going to do a lot of different things. Number one, the act of being positive, even if you're just putting on a happy face, causes you to be positive. That's been proven time and time again. That's also going to put positivity out there to those around you, which is going to reflect more positivity back towards you. Okay? We all have that one friend who's the negative person all the time, that they are literally painful to be around. Don't be that person. Be the person that's positive, the person that's good to be around, that people want to be around. They're going to feed that positivity back to you. I've said this before, and I didn't coin this, but it's been proven that whatever type of vibration you put out there in the universe, whether it's positive or negative, that's what reverberates back to you. I can't talk today very well, sorry. That's what's coming back to you. So if you're putting positivity out there, then positivity for the most part is what's coming back. And it's not a catch-all. Don't you go out there today and say, hey, I walked out the door smiling, I got hit by a bus. Doc, this is all your fault. I'm not saying it's 100% by any means, but just put the positivity out there. Be a positive person. If you're the person always bringing everybody down, nobody's going to want to be around you, and you're just going to bring yourself down deeper. It's going to be a self-fulfilling prophecy is what I'm telling you. So expose yourself to those positive things and positive people, and just avoid the negative. If there's that one person in your office or where you work, whatever it is, who's negative all the time, just avoid them. Okay? If your phone is ringing and it's that one friend who always just calls you to complain, don't answer. Do you have negative people that are constantly putting up negative stuff, just railing on and on and on against how much they hate politicians or whatever it is on social media? Unfriend them, unfollow them, mute them. Don't feed into it. Just avoid that. Avoid social media altogether. If you think there's too much negativity on social media, just avoid it altogether. Avoid negative TV shows. If the news makes you negative, don't watch the news. Okay? It's that simple. You know what? Hey, guess what? If something really important happens, somebody's going to let you know. Okay? If there's an active shooter situation 2 blocks from your house, you'll figure that out without watching the national news. Somebody's going to let you know. Okay? Just avoid the news. I have literally avoided the national news for months on end. I didn't miss anything. Okay? It took me 10 minutes to catch up when I came back around, because most of what they're talking about is not that important anyway. If there's a reality TV show that's negative, that's just a family fighting all the time, avoid it. Don't watch it. Watch something positive. Watch Hunting Hitler. That's positive. Okay? I can't say that enough. No matter what you're doing, you should be watching Hunting Hitler. But expose yourself to that. Seek out people that are positive. You should always... So you are who you surround yourself with. You really are who you surround yourself with. If you look at the crew that we put together at Sheepdog, they're all positive people. They're all the type of people that are going to make a positive impact. And that is an example I try to share with my children. That everybody has that one friend who, oh, he's a good guy, but, or, oh, she's a great girl, but, it's like she had to come, I've had to lend her or him, a couple $1,000s on a couple of different occasions, or had to sleep on my couch, or had to sleep in my garage, or had to bail him out from jail, whatever it might be. I'm not saying to be a bad friend and just cut everybody loose, but if you've got that one high maintenance friend that's always bringing you down, you're never going to reach your full potential. And sometimes you just got to have people grow up. That's the way it is. Surround yourself with people that you want to be like. Okay? Don't surround yourself with people that are the projects you have to fix. Surround yourself with the people that, hey, I want to be like that. I want to be a father like that guy. Or I want to be a friend like that guy. Or I want to be a leader like that lady. Whatever it might be, surround yourself with those people that are those positive influences. And that has to do with dating and marriage as well. You should be in long-term relationships with people that reflect the type of person you want to be. I have said time and time again, my wife Denise makes me want to be a better human being. She makes me want to be the husband that she deserves because she is such an amazing person. Those are the type of people that you need to be interacting with on a daily basis. People that you look at and you go, man, I want to be worthy of this person's friendship. I can't emphasize. I could go on and on. I'm going to leave it at that point, though. This is going to sound a little bit crazy. Have a plan to be happy. What? What does that mean? What do you mean have a plan to be happy? Like I gotta write down. I gotta have a 5-year plan to be happy. Well, just about. You you should be positive every day, but you should have a plan for how you're going to be happy. Do you hate your job? Okay, what's your plan to get out of it? What's your plan to get into a job that makes you happy? Because just waiting for it to fall into your lap, that's not going to happen. Somebody's not going to just go walk in and discover you someday and say, hey, I need you to be over here doing this because this is your dream job. You need to have a plan for that. Have a plan for how you're going to get there, okay? A lot of people are in jobs that they don't like. So have a plan to get the job that you do like. Do you not like your house and neighborhood? Have the plan, have a timetable and a way that you're going to get there to get into the house that you do like. Have a plan. I mean, you have a plan when you go to the grocery store and buy your groceries. You have a plan when you go out and buy your clothes. You have a plan at work doing whatever it is that you're doing. You need to have a plan on your life. Being happy is pretty easy, but it doesn't necessarily happen by accident, not in the long term. So if you're in something that to you is dead end, have a plan for how you're going to get out of that and get from point A, where you're not necessarily happy, to point B, where you will be. Think about realistically what your dream job is. Okay, like for me, I can't say, well, I want to fight in the UFC because I'm 51 years old, and that's just never going to happen. So that's not a good dream job idea for me, right? But pick something that is realistic, that you say, hey, I'm going to get joy out of this. There's an old saying, and I said it when I had Robin Black on, and he really epitomizes it. If you love what you do, you'll never work a day in your life. So why can't you? Don't listen to people that say, well, you can't do that. Well, why not? So if there's money to be made in something that you love, then get set up to do it. And you might not be able to leave the job that you're in right now, but at least you'll be doing the thing that you love. And sooner or later, maybe it'll start out, 80-20 time-wise, and then maybe 50-50, and maybe someday 20-80. If you might still have to do the job that you're doing to keep your pension plan and to your medical plan or whatever it might be, but you can be doing the thing that you really love and putting a lot more effort into that. So I'm just saying, and I'm not just talking about careers, I'm talking about life in general. Have a plan. You got to live your life, man. You only have one. You only have one life, and life is too short to be miserable. You can't go through life miserable. A job that you hate, a relationship that you can't stand, a house that it disgusts you to come home to every night. Life is short. What are you waiting for? You gotta get out of that. And you know what? If you look around at things in your life, I want you to ask yourself right now, if you're somebody listening to this who's on one of these psychiatric meds, and you're looking around at things in your life that you don't like about your life, if those changed, would you still need to be on that medication? I'm guessing probably not. So using the roadmap that I already talked about, starting with, basic things like diet and fitness and sleep, and a plan on how you're going to eliminate whatever that is, and do it. Life is too short. And you know what? You can't, if it's a job that you hate, you're not going to fix it, okay? Unless once you get promoted, that's the job that you want, okay? Maybe that's what you need to be striving for. And the same's true with relationships. And this is a hard pill for a lot of people to swallow, but if you've been in that relationship for 10 years and it's just sucked for 10 years, I'm not telling you to just, give up and walk away. And I'm not necessarily just talking about, marriage or something like that. I mean friendships as well. Give something an honest try, but at some point you got to go, you know what? Life is too short. Am I going to burn up 20 years associating with this person that gives me grief? No, I'm not going to do it. You only got one life, and it's short. You have to live it in a way that makes you happy. You should be doing something every day that makes you feel good. There's Twin Peaks is getting ready to come back out. A lot of you probably don't remember it, but I remember Twin Peaks for when it was first on TV. And Special Agent Dale Cooper, played by Kyle MacLachlan, said in one episode, he said, you have to find something every day. You have to give yourself a little gift every day. Find something every day that makes you smile. And for him, it was like just a good cup of coffee. You have to have that. Have something every day that you're going to look forward to. that at the end of the day, you can at least look back on that one thing and smile about it. Whether it was learning to play a couple chords on the guitar, or sparring in jiu-jitsu, or making your own craft beer in the garage, whatever it might be, something that you can look back and you can smile on what it was today and look forward to what it's going to be tomorrow as far as doing something that brings you joy. You should never go a whole day that you didn't get at least some little bit of joy out of that day. And I challenge you every morning when you get up, again, have a plan. Think about what you're going to do that day that's going to bring you some joy. And then at the end of the day, before you go to sleep, you reflect back on something that brought you happiness. And if you're doing that, you're going to those bright spots are going to start to look bigger and bigger and bigger. And again, if you're on one of those medications, you're not going to need it, because our tendency is to reflect on the bad. But if you're making a point to look forward to the good and look back on the good, the light from those good moments is going to eclipse the shadow from the bad moments in between, even if the light is outnumbered. Trust me on this. Stop waiting. This has to start today, man. Again, I've said this how many times now? Life is short. Take advantage of it. I talked about your interpersonal circle already, and I can't emphasize how important that is. Now I'm going to talk about the elephant in the room when we talk about mental health. And I think a lot of you probably knew this was coming. So we're going to talk about post-traumatic stress. Post-traumatic stress, also called post-traumatic stress disorder by some. Been a lot of focus on this over the last decade or so. A lot of disinformation out there. A lot of very slipshod reporting when it comes to incidents about what constitutes post-traumatic stress, and how people who have it might act in a certain situation. The annual rates worldwide of post-traumatic stress vary between about 0.5% to 1%. But in the U.S. annually, it's about 4%. And we're not just talking about veterans. 4%, so at least 4 times, possibly 8 times as high as the rest of the world. You have a lifetime chance in the U.S. of 9%. So 9% of the U.S. population will have bona fide post-traumatic stress at some point in their life. Why? Why is that? A lot of these factors we talked about already. A lot of what has to do with the American lifestyle, what our realistic expectations are of things, what our threshold is for things. A lot of that plays into it. But there are some specific factors when it comes to post-traumatic stress that I want to talk about. Most people, when they think of post-traumatic stress, they say, well, it's anybody can get it, and you're thrown into one of these stressful situations. Here's a statement that I hear all the time. Usually from family members, people who were not in our most recent conflict. I hear, we send these young kids over there, and that war, it just messes them up. That's too blanket a statement to be true. I'm sorry, it is. It's too. If that were true, then 100% of returning troops would have it, right? And that's not the case. Do 100% of troops returning have it? No. Do 100% of troops returning who saw active combat have it? No. Do 100% of troops returning who saw dead bodies? No. Do 100% of troops returning who got wounded themselves? No. I know some very well-adjusted people who have had some pretty serious wounds. So what are the factors that go into it? The first one is one that does not get talked a lot, and it's not popular to talk about. It's come up a couple of times. First, when there was a very large landmark study conducted through the VA after Vietnam, and that's genetics. There is a genetic predisposition in some people and a genetic resistance in others when it comes to post-traumatic stress. Specifically, what this has to do with, you don't need to know this, but there's this part of your brain called the hippocampus, and they have specifically noticed that people with a larger hippocampus are less likely to get post-traumatic stress. So all the genetics that go into the hippocampus formation are what would predispose someone or make them resistant to post-traumatic stress. This came up again after Mogadishu. And specifically, the question that got raised was, Why do so many of the guys from the 10th Mountain Division have it, and relatively so few of the Delta Force operators and the Rangers and the Task Force 160 aviation guys have post-traumatic stress, when the latter group is the group that saw the heaviest engagements? And again, it basically boiled down to genetics, among other things. Because when I say it boils down to genetics, that also means that there's a little bit of pre-selection genetically into who tends to choose which route in their career. And we do know multiple studies have been done on special operators, and there are genetic differences there. Certain chemical precursors, something called neuropeptide Y, and a lot of other things have been identified as differences that people have these genetic differences that draw them into these high risk, potential danger special operations careers. And you're already, by virtue of volunteering and being the type of person that's going to make it through that selection process, you typically have already proven yourself as somebody who is genetically wired a little bit differently and going to be genetically less predisposed, i.e. protected, from something like post-traumatic stress. They've also said that there's different probabilities of developing post-traumatic stress based on cultural and racial differences. That there are different, and this is open source. You can see this on the Wikipedia page. There's a different predisposition based on racial demographic for whether or not you might get post-traumatic stress, and culturally. So different parts of the world, and this is largely societally. So how people are raised in a society to kind of deal with stress plays a lot into whether or not they might develop post-traumatic stress. Gender also plays a role. So women are more likely to develop post-traumatic stress. Some studies have indicated possibly twice as likely. And please don't take any of the things that I'm saying as condemnations of any group, of any gender or anything like that. These are the facts as they've been scientifically put out. If anybody has anything to dispute it, email it my way. I'm more than happy to review it. And I'm not saying that women are always twice as likely to get post-traumatic stress, but in some studies they've shown that. And there's some other factors there. Again, society. We talk about this all the time, especially in the Western world, that we raise young women differently than we raise young men. Childhood mental trauma and how it was dealt with, especially unresolved childhood trauma. This is a huge, huge factor that until very recently was completely left out when people were thinking about who gets post-traumatic stress and who doesn't. We're talking about basically how that prefrontal cortex of your brain is hardwired as you're growing up. So how you are learning to cope with stress, how you are learning to cope with traumatic events. All of this is happening as that portion of your brain is forming. So if you're getting bad input during those formative years, if you are learning unhealthy stress reaction habits and unhealthy means of adapting yourself to those traumatic events, that carries on into adulthood. So then you don't have those coping tools because it's been hardwired at this point into your prefrontal cortex, and you just don't have those coping skills. It's been noticed that rates of post-traumatic stress in adulthood are higher among orphans and adults who as children were raised in foster care. Okay? So again, it all has to do with, how that prefrontal cortex was formed during those years. Did you have very solid things to cling to and consistent and healthy role models in how to deal with things? Or were you cast adrift and you didn't have those role models, and most of the formation of those pathways was done on your own as a child? Children actually don't tend to develop post-traumatic stress as much as adults do, and a lot of it has to do with that because their brains are still very fluid. Now, children exposed to those traumatic events, if they don't get a healthy mechanism to cope with it as a child are, again, more likely to develop post-traumatic stress later on as an adult. Another thing that we've talked about on this program multiple times, stress inoculation. So if, as an adult, with a fully formed prefrontal cortex, with everything hardwired, with whatever your genetics are, you have done some type of stress inoculation prior to any traumatic event you might get exposed to. So, and by this I mean you've done realistic training in whatever it is, whether that's law enforcement training, military training, whatever it might be. If you've done some type of stress inoculation, you've established some coping pathways. So when you do encounter that real stressful traumatic event, you've already built some pathways in your brain. Your brain knows how to release the proper neurochemical transmitters in the proper order, knows how to process that information, and you can do so much easier. And that's why stress inoculation in special operations training, in law enforcement training, any type of military or tactical training is extremely important, because it's giving you tools in your toolbox for how to cope with that traumatic event when it rears its ugly head. Another thing that we're still sorting out, even all these years into the war, is what is the post-event approach to how to deal with that traumatic event. So how is it getting dealt with? The pendulum has swung back and forth so many times in the war on terror, from we had no idea what to do, so we weren't addressing it all, to we were making every person that came back sit in group sessions for hours at a time and talk ad nauseum about every infinitesimal detail that they observed while they were there, to we're going to answer more with medications, and we're going to answer less with medications. So now we're going to take veterans out and have them ride mountain bikes and do triathlons, or we're going to take them to the shooting range, whatever it might be. What's the right answer to that? Man, I don't know. We're still kind of figuring that out. I can tell you that there's some basic things, and I'm going to talk about those coming up here ahead, about what you can do if you're involved in one of these traumatic events. But we're still cracking the code on that. So although I basically listed 7 factors for you there, and number 7, man, I don't have a 100% answer on that one. I've got some general left and right limits I can give you, but like I say, we're still sorting that out. I can tell you we've done a lot wrong, and I can tell you the things you don't want to do. So what can you do? So let's talk about all these factors, what you can do. What can you do about your genetics or your gender? You can't do anything. Okay? That's the hand you've been dealt. Okay? Whether you have the smallest hippocampus on Earth, there's nothing you can do about that at this point. Okay? So you're just going to have to deal with it. You won't know that until you see the elephant, as we say. So nothing you can do about it. Those are the cards you're dealt. What can you do about childhood mental trauma, unresolved childhood trauma? You can know about it. So you can look back on your childhood and you can say, you know what, I got shuttled from foster family to foster family, or I had an abusive father or mother, or I had a father or mother who was a substance abuser, whatever it might be. You just recognize that. Okay, you can't change the past, but you can look back on it and you can say, okay, what were the coping mechanisms that I was taught, or that I had shown to me, and how were they helpful and how were they not helpful? Did I have a father that put his fist through a wall every time something went wrong? Well, was that helpful? Obviously not. I went to the, maybe and I'm not speaking about my own father, but maybe you're saying, yeah, I went to the ER with my father on multiple occasions with a broken hand. So obviously that wasn't the right way to do it. So looking back, there's a saying in the military, you can learn something from every leader you've ever had, whether they're good or bad. You can learn how not to do things, and that's certainly been true in my career. Looking back on those role models you had as a child, learn from them. Learn from the good and from the bad. Who was it that gave you a poor example during that time, and don't do what they did. That's the best advice I can give you on that. What can you do about stress inoculation? You can train harder, and you can train realistically in everything you do. And I talked about this on the fight or flight episode of this program, and we talk about it all the time. Train realistically, okay? Going out to the range and shooting paper targets on a bright sunny day under the overhead so you got shade on you and plenty to eat and plenty to drink, that's not realistic. you need to be coming up with realistic training scenarios that realistically induce some stress within the bounds of safety, so that you know what it's like to be stressed. You need to push the envelope. You need to face your fears, and I've talked about this before. You need to induce some stress. And if you're unsure how to do that, go back and listen to the podcast that I did on fight or flight, and I talk specifically about how to do that stress inoculation, how to induce that stress in training. Very important. So let's say you're living your life as a sheepdog, and you have some type of event. You have to clear leather and gun down on somebody in the gas station, or you see a terrible automobile accident, or you're the victim of a violent crime, whatever it might be. Dealing with the aftermath of that. So it's important to know that it's okay to critique yourself. It's okay to look back and go, what did I do right? What did I do wrong? Especially if we're talking about a shooting situation. But don't crush yourself, okay? You had no idea that was going to happen, okay? Nobody goes out their door and say, today's the day I'm a victim of a violent crime, okay? That's why I carry a firearm every day, because I don't get to say that. I know I don't get to say, today's the day that somebody tries to kill me. I just have to be ready every day. So if you're involved in an event, whatever it might be, automobile accident, victim of a violent crime, having to shoot somebody yourself, whatever it is, you didn't choose that on that day. So don't crush yourself over it, okay? You reacted with the tools that you had. It's okay to critique what you did or did not do and say, these are adjustments that I would make if I ever had to do that again. Or these are adjustments that I'm going to make in my training now in case that happens again. And that's very important. That's how we learn from our mistakes. But don't crush yourself. Don't second guess. Don't if only. Oh God, if only. Hey, guess what? If only doesn't matter. You don't have a time machine. That bullet is out of the gun. You can't go back and change it. So dwelling on it and saying if only. Hey, if only I had bought in Casio stock when it was $2 a share, I'd be rich today. But I didn't. Okay? So there is no if only. There is only what is, okay? It is what it is. It happened the way it happened. Critique what happened. Learn from it. Be prepared in case it happens again. But don't keep going back and living in that moment saying, if I could have done this 2 seconds earlier, if I would have said this to change the situation or avoided this. Don't do that, okay? All you're doing is you're cycling all these bad neurotransmitters, and you're ramping up your anxiety as it pertains to that event. You're not going to get past it. You're not going to get better from it. You're not going to learn from it. So critique, but don't crush yourself. Going hand in hand to that, don't listen to people who weren't there. They weren't there. They didn't participate in the event, okay? Now, if you want to seek advice from somebody, whether they're an instructor or whatever it might be, that's fine. If you want to sit down with somebody and look them in the eye and say, hey man, this is how this played out. This is what I did. What would you have done? Okay, that's fine if you want to do it in an academic fashion to get that information and adjust your training going forward. If you're doing something to go forward with that's fine. But just like you shouldn't be second guessing yourself, nobody else has the right to second guess what happened. They weren't there. And you know what? Regardless of if there's somebody that you look up to who's been your firearms instructor or your martial arts instructor, whatever it might be, for decades, they weren't there in that particular situation. Whether they've been in other situations or not, doesn't matter. They weren't you at that time with your skills at that moment in that situation. So they don't get to judge you. Period. They can offer advice, they can offer guidance. They cannot offer judgment. That's not fair to you. That's not fair to the event. They don't get to do that. Don't let anybody do that. Don't let others' opinion affect how you look back on that event, because none of them were there in your shoes, okay? And we do it all the time, and I'm just as guilty of anybody else. Oh, I would have done this. I would have done that. Okay, I can say that all day long. I don't know that. I go out this door every day prepared to protect myself and protect my family. I don't know what's going to happen until it happens. So I don't get to make that judgment on you. I don't get to make that judgment on anybody else. Because unless I've been in that exact situation, not only the exact situation, but with the exact tools that you had, I don't get to judge you, and neither does anybody else. I'm going to leave it at that, but just remember that. It's okay to reflect back on the event, but don't dwell on it, because again, you cannot change it. It's okay to feel a certain way. You know, we talk, especially after the most recent election, we make fun of people because of the way they feel. And I'm making air quotes over here, but it's okay to have feelings about that event. You're going to have feelings about that. You're going to feel emotionally drained. You're going to feel maybe some regret about something that might have happened in that event. That's okay. It's okay to have those. It's not okay to keep living in that moment for the rest of your life, because that's not how you move forward. What I'm saying is, don't stifle those when they come up, but don't perseverate on them. Fancy $10 word. Don't get all hung up on that feeling. I have this terrible feeling of anxiety or regret or whatever it is pertaining to this event. Don't let that absorb you. Acknowledge it for what it is and deal with it, but don't stay caught up in it. And I know sometimes that's easier said than done. I do. This is completely up to you how it affects the rest of your life, either positively or negatively. Okay? A positive outcome is you do the critique without the crush. You recognize what happened. You make adjustments to your future training. You make adjustments that you know would help you react better in the same situation in the future, recognizing you'll probably never be in the identical situation again. A negative thing is you get stuck in this time loop where all you do is relive that again and again and again and again. And people around you can feed into this. And I've seen this in the Department of Defense, where they just want guys or ladies to come in and relive that event again. And it's going to be good if you talk about it. When somebody's told the story of how they lost their limbs for the 1,000th time, okay, that's not therapy, okay? That's getting stuck in a loop, okay? If talking about it with somebody the first 10 times didn't help, everything from then on is not going to help either. So you got to make a decision. Is this going to affect me positively or negatively? Again, have a plan. You want to be happy the rest of your life, right? So you're going to look back on that every day and let that moment that probably only occurred in a 5-minute span ruin the next 50 years of your life? Or are you going to move on from it? And I'm not dismissing anybody's trauma. I'm not saying that it's that easy. Oh, just get over it. I'm saying you got to do a close self-evaluation. I hope that's helpful. I hope that comes across as not being condemning, but I hope it comes across as being helpful, man, because I really do mean it. You got to continue to do positive things in response to negative feelings. You got to be positive. I've said that I don't know how many times, but this is particularly true after you have some type of negative event. So if you are going to talk about that event with people, do it with people that are going to give you proper and constructive feedback, okay? Not family members or coworkers or people who are just going to be judgmental and who weren't there and don't have the training and don't understand what you went through. Because I'm telling you, if you do have an event like this, anybody's going to be willing to listen to you. Because everybody wants to hear a story like that. Everybody wants to hear it, as sad as that is. But it's like, they always say, when you're driving by that wreck on the road, you got to look, right? People are like that. People have a morbid curiosity, and people are going to want to hear about it. Don't talk to those type of people about it. Talk to people that are going to give you positive feedback and not, again, critique but not crush. I can't emphasize that enough. I talked about not self-medicating before. This is even more important if you're dealing with the demons, man. If you are looking back on an event and you're like, oh, I'm having those feelings again, I'm having those memories, and I've got a close friend. He's like, he told me specifically about mixing alcohol with some psychiatric drugs that he shouldn't be doing, and I'm like, dude, you can't be doing that. And he's like, oh man, but at night the demons come hard. This isn't helping. This is numbing you temporarily, and things are 10 times worse when you wake up in the morning. Don't self-medicate. All right? The thoughts come, recognize them for what they are. Get on the treadmill. Get on the elliptical. It sounds like I'm minimizing it, I'm oversimplifying, but I'm not. It's like start associating some positive neurotransmitter and endorphin release with the memories of that. Okay? If the memories of that event come up, turn your attention towards positive things in your life. Okay? You start to think about the terrible event that happened. Think about how lucky you were to come home to the smiling faces of your children afterwards. You're going to start to build that positive association with that memory, and it's going to go a lot better. If every time that memory springs up, you grab a handful of pills, you grab a bottle of alcohol, that's what is forever going to be associated with that event in your mind, is those unhealthy pathways and more bad memories. That when I think of this terrible thing, I then go into a drunken stupor, and then I wake up with a headache and a pool of my own vomit, feeling lousy all over. Well, that makes the reflection onto that traumatic event worse every single time you do it. If every time that idea pops up in your head, you're thinking about all the positive things in your life that you came home to, or the positive things in your life that you still have, you start to put things in perspective, and you start to have a much more healthy outlook on that event and what occurred. Don't let it define you. Do not let a traumatic event in your life define you. We are very prone to this in the Western world. You see it on people's license plates. You see it on people's Twitter handles. That nothing. I could go on for hours just on this, but nothing gets under my skin more than somebody who on their Twitter bio says, "I will not be defined by my disease," and then their name of their Twitter handle is @ and the name of whatever disease champion or warrior or whatever. No, you are being defined by your disease, and I'm not saying that you stick it down in a corner somewhere. But if you're letting an event define, if you're letting a 5-minute period or even a day, let's say you had a traumatic period that lasted an entire day, 24 hours straight traumatic event. That's one day in your whole life. Are you really going to let that define you? No. You're more than that. You are all the other days of your life. You're all the good things in your life. So don't let that traumatic event define you, because then you've surrendered to it completely, and that's it. You're going to live in that terrible moment for all of your years, even if it was only 5 minutes. So don't do that. Don't be a victim, man. That's what I'm saying. Just don't be a victim, okay? If you're listening to this, you're not a victim. You're a sheepdog. Be a sheepdog, okay? Be the master of your own domain, and choose to go on and do the positive things in your life and live in those moments, not in that one moment. So we covered a lot today, man, and I'm actually over time, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time recapping, but basically what I'm telling you is, if you live a healthy lifestyle physically, that's going to reflect mentally. If you have a positive attitude, if you have a plan to be happy, if you surround yourself with positive people, all those are going to play into it. If you do tough, realistic training, as all sheepdogs do, that's doing two things. Number one, it's stress inoculating you. Number two, it's preparing you for that traumatic event. So when it does occur, your training is going to carry you through it. And then when you go back and do that critique, it's going to be minimal. You won't even have to crush yourself because you're trained, you're prepared, because you're a sheepdog. All of those things. And then after the event, again, critique but don't crush. Okay? Talk to people who are going to be constructive about it, not people that are going to be destructive about it. Don't let a traumatic event define you. Don't ignore the way it made you feel, but don't get caught up in that for the rest of your life, because you are your whole life. You're not just that one traumatic moment. And remember, I said, it's post-traumatic stress. It's not post-traumatic stress disorder unless you let it be a disorder. So don't let it be a disorder. Okay? It's okay to have some stress. And everybody, all of us who've seen the elephant, have those little things that make the hairs on the back of our neck stand up, that take us back to a moment when things were a little bit on the edge. But the key is not letting it debilitate you. And don't self-medicate. All right? There's a lot of things out there that can help people, and I'm not diminishing, the pharmaceutical industry by any means. I think they've done some incredible things, but doping yourself into oblivion is not the answer. Okay? dealing with things constructively. If you need a little bit of help chemically, that's one thing, but don't let it be a mask. Don't let drugs, either prescription or otherwise, be the hole into which you dump these bad memories and seal them up with concrete, because it's not going to work. Eventually that foundation's going to crack and you're going to have to deal with it. All right, man, we talked a lot about a lot of stuff in the wheelhouse today. We're over time. I apologize for that. I'm going to leave you with a quote since we talked about what goes on between the ears. I got one here from Sigmund Freud that I'm going to leave you with. Dr. Freud said, "Most people do not really want freedom because freedom involves responsibility, and most people are frightened of responsibility." If you're listening to this, you're a sheepdog. You're not afraid of responsibility, and you want your freedom. So reflect on that. Reflect on everything that I talked about today. And until next time, be a sheepdog.
You have been listening to the Sheepdog Project. Follow us on Facebook at facebook.com/Sheepdog Response. The views expressed on this podcast are those of the individual and do not represent any larger entity, public or private.